Hello, my name's David Ludlow, and I'm going to be the tutor on this course. Welcome to the channel. On this channel there's lots of tips, but one of the things I'm going to do now is to deliver my complete set of courses that I've been delivering out to businesses for the last few years. We've got Excel level 1, Excel level 2, level 3 and even level 4. We're going to start with level 1, that's this one here. This course is actually for anybody that's either new to spreadsheets or you've used spreadsheets for a long time but never had any formal training. Now's the chance to get some of those tips and maybe shortcuts and more efficient ways of working. The difference between this course and the course that I deliver out to businesses is that this course you can actually watch at your leisure. So you can choose the times to watch. I've split level 1 down into several modules so that you can just pick the first one, watch that, have a practice and then move on to the next when you're ready. So rather than it being a one-day course where you work with me from 9:30 till 4, you can actually split that up over the next few days, few weeks or few months, entirely up to you. This course is great for businesses because instead of paying me, you can now give this link and this playlist to your staff and ask them to work through. I will deliver it at the same pace and in the same way that I deliver it to businesses. So I hope you enjoy this. If you do, if you can remember to give me the thumbs up, that would really help. If you haven't subscribed yet, consider subscribing to the channel and then you'll get notified as I upload more videos. So I look forward to working with you and I do hope you enjoy it. Hello and welcome to the start of this course. We're going to start off with a blank spreadsheet and worksheet. I just want to explain a bit about terminology before I start. Across the top, if you have used a spreadsheet before, you will notice that you've got A, B, C, D, E and so on going across the top, and down the left hand side you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 and so on the left hand side. The letters across the top are referring to the names of the columns. So column A, for example, is everything down in that direction. That's all of column A and so on. And then the numbers on the left hand side are referring to rows, and 1 refers to all these squares or rectangles going across here, across that particular row. Now, just out of interest, I get asked often, how far does the spreadsheet go? Well, just this one worksheet. So those of you that work with sheets, we've got lots of different sheets down the bottom and we can click on the sheet names to move from one sheet to another. But just on this one worksheet, that A, B, C, D, etc. goes all the way across to XFD. So when you get to Z, it goes AA, AB, AC and so on, right across to XFD. So that's 16,384 columns across the spreadsheet. Now going down, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. It actually goes down to 1,048,576. So it's quite a lot of cells there. Each one of these square or rectangle boxes, as you've probably gathered, are called cells. So we've got columns going down, rows going across, and where they meet is called a cell. So the cell that I've clicked in here is H8. So it's always the letter first and then the number. So what I'd like you to do is go and click into a cell in the middle of your spreadsheet if you are working along with me, and that cell that you've just clicked in is the active cell. So that's the cell with that green bold line around the outside. There is a little square dot in the bottom right hand corner, which we'll talk about later, but that is your active cell. That means if you type something into that cell, or if you start typing, it would type into that cell. So if I start typing a number, it types into that cell. Let's just talk about this particular cell. This cell that I'm in, H9, you'll see that it's slightly shaded, that H at the top and the 9 on the left hand side. There's also a green line underneath the H and a green line next to the 9. So that's indicating that you're in H9. But also if you come up to the name box and if you hover over this box here, it pops up and says name box. You will actually see your cell reference in there. Now this is a great way of navigating, because if you click into there and type a cell reference, I'm going to type A1 and press enter, that takes your active cell to that cell reference. So that's great if you want to get to somewhere like ZZ522. You don't have to scroll up and down to get there, you can just type it in the top. So let's just click back to a cell in the middle, in my case H9. We're going to talk about entering to start with, so that we don't get that error where you click somewhere and it changes the formula that's in there and messes up the contents. Now we're just going to do this with numbers rather than a formula at this stage. Let's just type a number in. I'm going to put 23. Now the thing to notice, when you start typing, it types into that cell, that active cell, but it also types, if you look at the top, into what's known as the formula bar. So you can see I've got 23 down there and 23 at the top. And if you look into the cell, you should see a flashing insertion point. That's that line that's flashing on and off. That means if I start typing, it will type at that point. But the other thing to notice and point out is if you look at the top at your ribbon bar, you'll notice that most of it is greyed out. And that's because we're in edit mode. We are editing a cell, and most of those commands at the top are greyed out and you can't use them. What you have to do is make sure that when you've finished editing, that we enter properly so we don't mess things up. Now to be honest, with a number or some text it wouldn't make any difference, but if you had formulas in there, this could make a big difference. So the first thing I want you to do is on your keyboard just tap the enter key, and when you tap it, that enters whatever's in there. Doesn't matter whether you're at the end of it or the middle of it, it will enter whatever you've typed in, and it will move your active cell down. Now if you go and have a look at your ribbon bar, you'll notice that it's not greyed out anymore and it's all active. Okay, so enter will enter without messing anything up. It will not change formulas, it will just enter, but it moves your active cell down. Now if you type another number, doesn't matter what number is, and that puts us back into edit mode. Now if you look on your keyboard, normally on the left hand side of your keyboard you've got a key that's called tab, T-A-B, or it's got an arrow pointing left and an arrow pointing right. Mine has actually got the word tab and those two arrows on it, and if you tap that once, it enters without messing anything up and moves your active cell to the right. Okay, so let's just type another number in. I've put 23 into that one. If you now hold your shift key down and tap enter, that will enter and move your active cell up. And we'll just do another number and hold your shift key down and press tab. That will enter and move your active cell to the left. So we can now move in the direction that we want it to move in, ready for our next entry. That's 4 of the 6 methods that Microsoft have given us. So if you now just click into another blank cell in that group, type another number, again it doesn't matter what number. If you bring your mouse up to next to your formula bar, you should see an FX and a green tick and a red cross. If you hover over that green tick, you'll notice that it pops up and says enter. If you click that, it enters but leaves your active cell in the same place. So that's really handy if you're going to do something else within that cell. Maybe copy it down, or maybe change the colour, whatever it is that you're doing. You don't need to click back in there because you're there. So now just click into another blank cell next to that. So that was 5 methods, and the 6th method is actually a shortcut for that tick. So let's type another number in, and the shortcut for that tick is hold your control key down on your keyboard and then tap your enter key, and that will enter but leave your active cell in the same place. Okay, so there are our 6 methods of entering. What we don't do is use our arrows to enter, but you can move your arrow keys on your keyboard to move your active cell. So I'm pressing the down arrow, the up arrow, the left arrow and the right arrow, and that moves your active cell. But you do not use those for entering, because if there was a formula in there, the potential is that that would mess the formula up. And we'll have a look at that later on in the course. Okay, so there's your first 6 methods of entering. What we want to do is look at deleting, and there's a couple of ways we can delete. I mean, Microsoft always give you 2 or 3 ways of doing the same thing, to be honest. But let's just type a number in a cell and do a control and enter, so that we're in that same cell. Now the first method that I see some people use is the backspace. It does delete it, but what it does, it leaves you in edit mode, which is absolutely fine if you are going to edit in that cell and you're going to type something else in. You can see the flashing insertion point, and you can see that the ribbon bar is greyed out. Let's just put that number back in there. If you're going to delete it and not edit in that cell, then the delete key on your keyboard is a much better option. So if I now press delete, and you see that that's deleted it, and we're not editing the cell. Our ribbon bar is still coloured and still active, and we're not in edit mode. If you do make a mistake, we're going to simulate a mistake now. You know the mistake I talked about, where if you've got a formula and you click somewhere and it changes that formula, rather than trying to click back and get that formula right, because it might not be your formula, so you may not know what somebody has done. There's a nice way to make sure that you recover from that situation. So what we're going to do, we're going to go into one of the cells that you've put a number in, and we're going to go into edit mode. So let's just talk about that first. There's at least 3 ways of going into edit mode. The first way is to come up to your formula bar, and you can click into there, and you've now got an insertion point in your formula bar. But if you look at your ribbon bar, it is now greyed out again, so you are editing that cell. And if I type a couple of zeros, let's say, on the end, whatever I type in that formula bar also appears down in that cell. Take it back to how it was with that 34 in there in this case. What you can also do to go into edit mode is double click the cell. So when I say double click, I always mean the left mouse button. If I want you to click the right mouse button, I will actually say, okay, so if I say click or double click, it's always left. So double click the left mouse button, and that puts you into edit mode, and your insertion point is wherever you've clicked. Mine happens to be in between the 3 and the 4. So that's the second method. And then the third method is the one that I tend to use, is the shortcut F2. So if you look along your keyboard at the top, you've got F1, F2, F3 and so on. If you press F2, that puts you into edit mode, but it puts your insertion point on the right hand side of whatever's in that cell. Now before we actually do start this, those F keys, if that didn't work for you, then it could be that you're trying to increase your volume or your brightness or whatever the other option on that key, you may have to press your FN key on your keyboard. That's normally on the bottom left hand side of your keyboard, and what that does, that swaps it round. So if I've got F2 and the decrease volume on mine, so if I want to decrease the volume, I hold the FN key down and press that F2 key, and if I don't hold the FN and I press F2, it takes me into edit mode. Yours could be the other way round, so it might be that you press F2 and it does something like your brightness or volume, in which case you need to hold your FN key to get the F2 to work. Okay, so I've pressed F2, I'm in edit mode, I'm going to simulate a mistake, just put a couple of zeros there. Let's assume you've clicked somewhere, you've changed a formula and you go, oh no, what have I done? Well, I know there's an undo button, but at this stage while you're editing, it's much easier to bring your mouse over to that red cross, and if you hover over that red cross at the top there, it pops up and says cancel. Click that and that takes the cell back to how it was before you made a mistake. Okay, we're going to do that once more. I'm going to press F2 in that cell. I'm going to put a couple of zeros to simulate a mistake, and we could press that or click that cross at the top, but there's a shortcut for that cross, and the shortcut's really simple. It's the escape key on the keyboard. So if I tap the escape key, that takes the cell back to how it was before I made a mistake. So now we've got entering, we've got deleting, and we can cancel an error that we've made while we're editing. If we need to undo things, and you can do this on most of the software that Microsoft have, you've up the top here we've got an undo button, and if I click that, that undoes each stage one at a time. Every time you click it, it just takes you back a stage. Likewise, there's a redo button at the top, so if you've undone too far, you can actually redo and go back a bit. What I'd like you to do is, to the left of these numbers that we've put in here, can you just type some text? It doesn't really matter what the text is, maybe your first name, so just type your first name, press enter, and then we want some more text underneath that. So I've just typed my first name and second name, press enter, so we're moving our active cell down, and then just type some numbers. Doesn't matter what the numbers are, just type the number, press enter, and just come down about 10 cells or so, just so we've got a bit of data there. And I want to talk about formatting the active cell. So if we click into that David that's there, or whatever text you've typed in that first one, if I want to format that cell, I can use the home ribbon bar. The home ribbon bar has lots of commands on there, and they're all generally to do with formatting. If you click through the ribbon bar, they tend to describe what the commands do. So insert inserts things, I've got draw on mine, page layout, and so on. But the home tab, rather than it being called format, is called home. But if you just know that the home ribbon bar is mainly about formatting. Now what we're going to do is we're going to make that bold. To do that, if you come up to the B that's in this font group at the top here, click B, and that turns bold on. And actually what that's doing, that's making the cell formatted to bold. So you can actually format a blank cell to say bold or any format, and when you type into it, it takes that format on. These commands generally are toggle commands, so they toggle the command on and off. So if I now click B again, that takes bold off. And if you want to know the shortcut for these, if there is what we call a control shortcut, if you hover over B, for example, it pops a little tooltip up that tells you that bold is Control B. So what I can do now is hold Control down and press B on my keyboard, and you see that it makes my name bold. And if I do Control B again, it toggles it off. There's lots of formatting that's up there, which we won't go through every single one on this particular course, but it's good for you to have a little play with. We will do a few more a bit later on in the course. Those commands will apply to what we call the active cell. So in my case, the active cell is A10. But if I want to make all of this list bold, then what I need to do is make that range active. And to do that, if you hover over the middle of the first cell that we want, and you've got that white plus sign, hold your left mouse button down and keep it held down and just drag down. You'll see that that highlights, that makes that range what we call active. It's an active range. And now if I click B or Control B, it will apply that format to the whole range. Now a lot of people ask me, why is that first one white? That's because that white cell is your active cell. So if you did start typing, it would type into that active cell. And that's all it is. But the main thing is this solid green line indicates the active range. So if I click B again or Control B, that switches it off. If you hover over I, you'll see that Control I is for italic. I can turn that on or off. These alignment tools are a bit different. First of all, whenever you type text, it always goes to the left, so it's left justified. And if you type numbers or dates, they go to the right hand side, so they are right justified. And if you want to change that at any time, you can actually come up to these alignment commands, hover over, let's say center, click center, and that will center align them. Now if you have a spreadsheet and you think, actually I want the text on the left and the numbers on the right, you don't have to go back over them and click left justify for these two and right justify for the others. We can actually take that center off by clicking it again, and it will take it back to its defaults of right for numbers and dates and left for text. Now I don't know if any of you noticed, but if you hover over any of these alignment tabs, there's actually not a control shortcut. Because spreadsheets were out before the mouse was out being used, there's shortcuts. We call them shortcuts now, but when I was first started using spreadsheets, we just didn't have a mouse, so we had to use our keyboard. All of those keyboard strokes are still in the software. We haven't got a control center, but what we can do is use key tips. I've still got this highlighted on the left hand side. I've still got an active range. If you look down on your keyboard to the left hand side of your space bar, you should have a key that says ALT. So it's not the one to the right hand side, because that's Alt Grav, Alt GR. It's the one on the left that you want. And if you just tap that and let go of it, at the top you should see a load of letters and numbers. These are called key tips. The ones I want to look at are the ones that's on those ribbon bar names. So you've got F below File, H below Home, N below Insert, and so on. So we want something that's on the Home tab, which is H. So if you just tap the H on your keyboard, you can now see letters and numbers on all the other commands all across that particular ribbon bar. And you'll see that bold is number 1, italics number 2. But if you look at center line, it's AC. Now this is sequential, so you need to tap the A first on your keyboard, and you'll see all the A key tips. And then we want C on our keyboard. Now tap the C and let go, and you've now center aligned using key tips. If I want to take that off using key tips, again I'm going to tap the Alt key, which brings all those letters and numbers up, then the H, and then AC, A and then the C, and that is now turned center align off. At any stage, if you've got those key tips up and you need to move back one, so if we press the Alt key and then let's press A for data, for example, and you think, oh, that's the wrong one, I didn't want data. What you do is just tap your escape key and it takes you back a level, and then you can select the one you want. If I want H, I can press H on the keyboard and I've now got the home ribbon bar selected. If I want to come out of that altogether, I can just press escape once and then escape again, and that's taken us away from the key tips. That's a great way of working if your mouse has stopped working, or you're out traveling and you're in the car or on a plane and the mouse is a bit awkward to use. Then key tips is great. You don't have to mess around with the mouse pad or the mouse. Okay, a few other tips while we're on this page that we're working on, and that's about navigation. I've already talked about navigating with your arrow keys, and if you press your down arrow, right arrow, that will navigate you around. But sometimes we want to get round vast amount of data fairly quickly. So what we can do is, if you just click into A1 on your spreadsheet, and if I want to move to the first piece of data, which is in this case my name, if you hold the control key down and just tap the down arrow, you'll see that your active cell stops at the first piece of data it finds on the way down. Now if we did that again, it will go to the bottom of your data and actually stop at the first blank cell it finds. So if you have got blank cells halfway, it will stop just before that blank cell. But in my case, my first blank cell is A21, so it stops at A20. I've got no other data down here, so if I did control down arrow again, that will take us down to a 1,048,576 right at the bottom of the spreadsheet. But this works going up, so control and then the up arrow will stop at the first piece of data it finds, and then we do that again. Control up arrow will stop at the just before the first blank cell it finds, and then control up arrow takes us all the way to the top. If there was no data there, so if I just move over to B1 where I've got no data, control down arrow will take us right to the bottom because there's nothing to stop it, and then control up arrow will take us back to the top. Now the same happens going left and right, so if I click into my name and hold control and tap the right arrow, that stops at the first piece of data. Right arrow stops at the last piece before a blank cell, and then control right arrow takes us across to XFD, which is 16,384 columns. And the same happens going left, so control left arrow will stop at the first piece, control left, again the last piece before a blank cell, and then control left again takes us back to the beginning. So that's a great way of maneuvering around large sets of data. And one of the things we did earlier when we were formatting, we highlighted a range of data. And I don't know if any of you've done this, but when you've got lots and lots of data and you're highlighting it and it's going way beyond the bottom, it starts going faster and faster, and you sometimes go past the bit that you want, like I'm doing here. See, I've gone down a long way. What we can do is use the keys to maneuver us around. So let's just get to the first one. To highlight this using the keys, instead of control and down arrow, it's control shift and tap your down arrow, and that will highlight down to the first blank cell it finds. It always stops just before that blank cell. If you want to maneuver this area one at a time, then you can hold the shift key on its own, and see I'm using the up arrow or the right arrow or the left arrow, and we can just cover small bits just using our keyboard like that. But if we wanted to do a whole section, it's control shift, tap the down arrow, and down it goes. If I now did control shift right arrow, it would go across and stop at the first piece of data it finds, and if I did that again, it goes across to the last piece of data. So that's a great way of highlighting big amounts of data using your keyboard, whereas small bits, it's sometimes easier just to drag your mouse across holding your left mouse button down. Before we move on to other items in this course, I just want to talk about a couple of shortcuts and a couple of tips that are going to potentially help you. If you've got a spreadsheet with lots of worksheets on, like I've got here, I've got lots of worksheets on the bottom, and if you've used spreadsheets before, you know that you click on the worksheet name down the bottom and that takes you to that particular worksheet. If you have got lots of worksheets and they're going off way beyond what you can see, rather than scrolling through them, which you can use these arrows for down the bottom left, I can click that right arrow and it moves me through, and I can click the left arrow and it moves me back. But the little tip I've got is if you hold your control key down and click that right arrow, it moves you completely to the right hand side of all your worksheets, and if you hold your control and click the left arrow, that moves you back to the left hand side. So it's a nice quick way of getting round. The other thing that's useful is if you right click on those arrows down the bottom left there, you actually get the name of all the worksheets, and it's much easier to search up and down here. So if I go to this one, show formula for example, click OK, it takes me directly to that worksheet. And then if I want to get back quickly to the beginning, control, click that left arrow and then click the sheet that I want. If you like shortcuts and you want to sequentially move through your worksheets, if you look on your keyboard, you should have a key that says page down and a key that says page up. So it actually says those words, page down and page up. If you hold your control key and click and press, I should say, one that says page down, that moves you sequentially to the right through your worksheets. If you hold control and press the page up, that moves you back through the worksheets the other way. Remember, that's not the arrow keys, that's the one that says page down and page up. And then at the top we've got our ribbon bar, and actually this came out in Office 2007, so before that we never used to have a ribbon bar, we just used to have drop down menus off of these names at the top. So this did take up some space, but Microsoft have given us a way of hiding that, and there's different ways of doing it, but the quick way is Control F1 and that hides it. You can still see your tab names at the top, but it now gives you a bit more space, and if you click any one of the ribbon bar names, it drops your ribbon bar down just like a menu, and you can go and make your choice, and then when you click back into your spreadsheet it hides it again. If I want it back permanently, Control F1 and that brings it back permanently. Now remember, some of you may have to hold that FN key down, so it would be Control FN and the F1 key. Since the newer versions of Excel, Microsoft have given us a way of actually hiding absolutely everything, so we get a full screen of spreadsheet. And what you do is hold Control Shift and press F1, and that now gives us a full screen of spreadsheet. How exciting. It can just give you that bit more working room and less of a distraction. And if you want it then back temporarily, you've got 3 dots on the top right, and if you click those 3 dots it brings your ribbon bar back just like a drop down menu. You could go and make your choice, whatever it is, and when you click back into the spreadsheet it hides it again. If you want it back permanently, Control Shift and F1 and you've got all your ribbon bar names etc back permanently. So okay, I think it's time to have a little practice and time for a break before we move on to the next lesson. I hope you enjoyed that, hope you gained something out of it, and remember this is the beginners, but there's always tips for people that have used the spreadsheet for a long time. So keep it going and I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.